Imagine that everything you think you know about female desire is an illusion, that love is not tenderness, but a strategy as ancient as power itself. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Behind every sweet gesture lies calculation. Behind every silence, a test. He uncovered a pattern so dark that he had to hide it to avoid being destroyed. Men ignored it. Women perfected it. And once you see what he discovered, you will never look at a smile the same way again. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and stay until the end of the video. And by the way, give it a like, share it, and enjoy the content. Listen, most men fail with women not because they're stupid or unattractive. They fail because they were sold a lie so perfectly packaged that they don't even realize they're living inside an illusion. They told you, just be yourself, as if authenticity were enough. They told you, treat her like a queen, as if servitude had ever been seductive. They promised you that love conquers all, while the courts are filled with divorces and the streets with lonely men who don't understand what went wrong. And you know what's the cruelest part of all this? While you were following those rules word for word, there were others who completely ignored them and got exactly what you were chasing. Not because they were better men, but because they understood something you were never taught. Now let me tell you something I discovered years ago, something that took me a long time to accept. I too believed in romantic love. I believed that if you were good, noble, and devoted, she would eventually see it. I spent months being the perfect man for someone who barely looked at me. And when I finally got tired and walked away, guess what happened? Suddenly I was interesting. Suddenly, my absence was worth more than all my previous presence. That's when I understood that female desire doesn't work the way we were told. It turns out that Machiavelli, that Florentine genius everyone knows for The Prince, discovered something far more dangerous than political strategy. In his private writings, those that circulated only within the intimate circles of Florence, he spoke of something he called the hidden dynamic of female choice. These weren't public lectures, they were closed-door meetings, forbidden conversations, where every word defied what society considered proper. Because what Machiavelli saw was this: behind every act of affection lies a transaction of power. Desire is not a pure emotion, it's a strategy, and women consciously or unconsciously master it from childhood. Think about it for a second. How many times have you seen a woman complain that all men are the same, only to choose the exact same type again and again? How many times have you heard her say she wants someone stable and kind, yet she falls for the one who drives her insane? It's not coincidence, it's a pattern, a code that repeats itself across all cultures and all eras. And hey, if this is resonating with you, follow me here on the channel, because we're just scratching the surface. Machiavelli understood that humans don't act according to what they say, they act according to what benefits them. He applied that brutal insight to politics, but also to something far more intimate: attraction. And what he discovered was so disturbing that his own contemporaries tried to bury it. Because accepting this truth means admitting that romantic love, as it's been painted for you, is a fairy tale. The truth is darker and, paradoxically, more liberating. He documented case after case of noble women. They abandoned perfect men for others who treated them with indifference. Machiavelli observed how absence created more desire than constant presence, how mystery defeated transparency, how unpredictability triumphed over stability. It wasn't cruelty, it was instinct. And here's what no one tells you: when you become predictable, when she knows exactly what you'll do, when your attention is always available, you lose all your value. Because the human brain doesn't treasure what's guaranteed, it values what must be earned. So what do you do with this information? Do you deny it because it makes you uncomfortable, or do you begin to see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be? Because once you see the pattern, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. And believe me, there's so much more to uncover about how this game really works. Now that you understand the basics, something deeper is waiting for you, something Machiavelli called the hidden cycle. And when you grasp it, everything you thought you knew about women will click in a way you never imagined. If what you've just heard stirred something inside you, if you feel that someone is finally speaking the unfiltered truth, then stay. Subscribe to the channel, not as an empty gesture, but because you understand that this kind of knowledge doesn't reach everyone, and those who have it play with advantage. Now things get interesting, because once you accept that female desire works differently from what you were taught, the obvious question appears: why? Why does a woman say she wants one thing but respond to something completely different? The answer lies in something Machiavelli identified centuries ago in the courts of Florence. He observed how the women of the aristocracy wielded power without ever having it formally. They couldn't rule like men, but they ruled the men who ruled, and they did it with an invisible weapon, perception. Machiavelli understood it perfectly. Power isn't taken by force when you're physically weaker. It's gained by controlling what others desire from you. And women learned this from the cradle. Let me tell you about one case he documented. They called her the Wolf of Florence, a noble woman, refined, educated, the perfect image of virtue. But in private, she played with her admirers like chess pieces. She gave her attention one day, then vanished for weeks. No explanations, only silence. And here's the fascinating part. The more her absence grew, the more desperate they became. Her strategy wasn't love, it was uncertainty. Because she had learned something most men never understand: what you withhold becomes valuable, what you delay becomes treasure. Machiavelli traced the roots of this behavior back to her childhood. At 6 years old, she had watched her mother dismantle her father's reputation without raising her voice once, through strategic silences, perfectly timed tears, and the ability to make him feel guilty for things he hadn't even done. The girl learned early. Power isn't what you say, it's what you make others feel. And here's the uncomfortable truth: this isn't conscious manipulation in most cases, it's programming. Women grow up seeing that well-timed vulnerability brings protection, that beauty opens doors, that silence at the right moment speaks louder than 1,000 words. They're not being evil, they're being strategic. And strategy, when practiced since childhood, becomes instinct. The truth is, there's a huge gap between what women publicly claim to want and what secretly ignites them. In public, they'll say they want stability, kindness, a man who listens. And yes, they do want that, but only for a certain kind of relationship. Desire, the fire that makes them obsessed, doesn't awaken with safety. It awakens with tension. Think of it this way: the human brain was designed to survive, not to be happy. And from an evolutionary perspective, a woman couldn't afford to choose poorly. She needed someone who could protect her, but also someone other women desired. Because if others wanted him, that meant he was worth having. That's why you've probably seen this happen. A woman can ignore a man for months, but the moment another woman shows interest in him, suddenly something awakens. It's not insecurity, it's biology. Her brain labels as valuable what others desire. And here's the detail no one tells you: when you become too accessible, when your attention is always available, she stops seeing you as a prize. She sees you as a guarantee, and guarantees don't excite, they comfort. And comfort kills desire. Now I know this sounds contradictory, so you might ask, then should I treat her badly? That's not the point. The point is that attraction isn't an act of fairness. It's not about if I'm good, she should reciprocate. It's an emotional phenomenon that follows specific patterns, and one of those patterns is polarity. She needs to feel there's something to earn, that your time, your energy, your attention aren't infinite. That if she doesn't value you, she'll lose something real. Men who understand this don't chase, they don't beg, they don't exhaust themselves trying to prove they're the best option, they simply are. And that calmness, that absence of need, is magnetic. Because Machiavelli was right about one thing: the one who shows desperation loses power, the one who remains calm gains it. And if this made you think differently, leave a piece of advice in the comments, something that could help other men, something you learned the hard way, something that cost you to understand. because together we can map the entire terrain. Now then, what you've just heard is only the first layer, because there's something deeper still, something Machiavelli discovered and called the shadow cycle, an invisible mechanism that governs almost every decision a woman makes about you without her even knowing it. And this is where things get complicated, because everything I've told you about female desire, polarity, and tension has a darker side that no one dares to mention. It's a force that operates beneath consciousness itself. Machiavelli called it the shadow cycle. It's not something women decide consciously. It's a biological program, an invisible current guiding their choices long before logic gets involved. And when you understand how it works, you begin to see patterns where before you only saw chaos. Let me show you from another angle. Think of the last time you saw a woman say, with full conviction, "I want a good man, stable, kind, who treats me well." And then you watched her fall head over heels for someone who was the complete opposite. Was she lying? Number. She wasn't expressing her conscious truth, but her subconscious was responding to a completely different program. What she says she wants is what her rational mind believes is right. What actually arouses her is what her instinct recognizes as genetically valuable. And those two things are often polar opposites. Machiavelli documented a case in 1500 that illustrates this perfectly. A countess abandoned her husband, a wealthy, educated man with impeccable social standing. She left him for a commoner, uneducated and poor. The scandal was enormous. How could a woman of her class act so irrationally? The answer was brutal. Her husband had become predictable. He adored her, obeyed her every whim, constantly sought her approval. He was gentle, perfect, and invisible. Because when someone gives you everything without effort, you lose interest. There's no tension, no story, no spark. But the commoner, he ignored her, disappeared for days, never begged, never worshipped her. And that indifference drove her mad. Her brain translated that distance as value. If he didn't need her, he must be important. If others could have him, she had to earn him. And that's the cycle. What she gets easily, she devalues. What she must conquer, she treasures. It's not cruelty, it's biology, a built-in filter shaped to choose the strongest possible mate. The funny thing, it also works in reverse, but differently. Men do the same with other things. Machiavelli wrote, "People forget the death of their father sooner than the loss of their inheritance." It sounds cold, but it's true. We value what costs us something. What comes too easily leaves no mark. So what does that mean for you? It means that when you try too hard, when you reveal your entire hand from the beginning, you send the wrong signal. You're telling her, primitive brain, "I'm easy to get. I'm not scarce. You can have me whenever you want." And her subconscious replies, "If he's that easy, he probably isn't worth much." Once you grasp this, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop performing for attention, because now you understand that real attraction isn't built by giving. It's built by withholding, not as a game, but as calibration. You no longer hand out your presence cheaply. You make it earned. And when she feels that contrast between what she desires and what she can't fully possess, that's when obsession begins. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote, "Men ought to be either caressed or destroyed." In other words, you must never place yourself in the middle. The middle is forgettable. It's comfort without tension. It's kindness without mystery. And mystery is what feeds desire. When you become unpredictable, you awaken something ancient in her, a kind of magnetic uncertainty. She begins to wonder what you're thinking, why you're silent, what occupies your mind when you're not with her. That curiosity becomes hunger. But here's the paradox. The moment you chase that hunger, it dies. The moment you try to control how she perceives you, you lose the very power that made you attractive. That's why Machiavelli warned that those who try to be loved above all end up despised, because love without fear breeds contempt. And no, this isn't about cruelty. It's about polarity. Every emotion needs its opposite to stay alive. Desire dies in safety. Respect dies in excess familiarity. That's why kings built thrones to create distance. Not because they hated their people, but because proximity without boundaries destroys reverence. So if you want to command the same energy in your life, learn distance. Not the cold distance of arrogance, but the silent distance of someone who knows their worth. The man who doesn't rush to explain himself, who doesn't react, who doesn't beg to be understood. That man becomes a mystery. And mystery, my friend, is the language of power. Now let's close the circle. You've learned what Machiavelli saw, the patterns hidden beneath desire, the shadow cycle, the paradox of attraction, the truth that being too good, too available, too predictable destroys value. But the final lesson isn't about women, it's about you. Because if you strip away all the games and theories, what's left is this. People only respect what you respect in yourself. If you treat your time like it's infinite, others will waste it. If you tolerate disrespect in the name of kindness, others will test you. If you give everything hoping to be loved, you'll end up resented. So stop seeking fairness, seek clarity. Stop trying to be understood, become undeniable. When you finally learn to sit in silence, to watch without reacting, to let others reveal themselves while you remain still, that's when you cross the line from the ordinary to the powerful. Because true dominance isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering your impulses. It's not the ability to command, it's the ability to not need to. And that's what Machiavelli meant when he said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Not fear as terror, but fear as respect. The quiet respect that follows a man who no longer chases, no longer explains, no longer bends. He simply is, untouchable, composed, and free. So remember this. You don't become powerful by playing games, you become powerful by becoming rare.